agreement of our ancestors that they put together, so that we could live in peace and harmony with each other and all share in absolute abundance under the auspices and the guidance and the care of those who understood how the land operates. Because you had people come to our place over in Scotland, they might want to go, oh, there's a bit of firewood, oh man, you know, took 200 years for that tree to get that high. So it's by having the authority held by the people of the land, because they understand the rhythms of the land, they understand the weather patterns, they understand the whole rhythm of it, because they're in tune with it. A lot of us have become disenfranchised or separated from our land, or the land of our forebears. And this is done deliberately. Right. So this Article 4, as I say, was the international recognition. Now, this went in place, and this put a wasp up the arse of the oppressive regime, because they weren't ready for this. Okay. So, consequently, there was a lot of deception started. And one of those was done with the New Zealand company, who is aka the East India Company, who are, again, a bunch of pirates. Correct terminology is they're actually privateers, because they're pirates with a license to operate as a pirate. They're still pirates. Now, the interesting thing that I came across was under the law of privateers, which, like, remember, during the Second World War, you had German raiders going about. During the times of what we call, you know, the pirates and the sailing navies, or the sailing ships of the world, you know, you could fly under a false flag, but before you fired the first shot under the law of privateers, you must raise your true colours. I wonder why there's so much emphasis being put on changing the flag of the realm. So anyway, this is in place. It's been reenacted now. So too has the Te Tiriti. We're just doing what we're doing as a hapu, as a group of people who have come together, exercising our right of self-determination and choosing a form of which we wish to live in peace and harmony with each other and with all humanity, as is our right. So our proclamations are open up for a rebuttal if anybody thinks that they have claim upon us or own us or anything. And it's not an exclusive club, it's absolutely inclusive, because what our ancestors put in place was for everyone. And they put the doorway there, which, as you see in Article 3, where they call upon the southern tribes, that's still open today. Any hapu can proclaim the right of self-determination. The ancestors of the Tupuna didn't have to proclaim their self-determination. They knew it. So did everybody else. But we're 180 years now down the track of slavery and oppression, so just to make sure that the regime is aware, we proclaim our right of self-determination. We proclaim ourselves to be a sovereign state. In other words, to live in honour, acknowledgement of the Creator, and to be of service to humanity. And we proclaimed our enactment of the internationally recognised 1835 Ewa Putanga, and our honouring and upholding of the 1840. That's our right. Now, anybody who doesn't think that's our right is welcome to come and rebut our proclamations. As well as anybody who thinks that that's a good way of expressing themselves in the way they'd like to live are welcome to put their proclamations in too. It's not an exclusive club. It's your right. It's your right of self-determination, and it's your right to live in a sovereign state if you so choose. But one is a right, the other one is a choice. So you have the right to make the choice if you wish to live in a sovereign capacity. You absolutely have the right of self-determination. Now, I've had people say to me, oh, do you think our ancestors were really that smart? Yeah. Hell yes. And thank goodness they were. Because we're unique in the world is that because of this proclamation and because of the agreement that was worked out between our ancestors from both sides of the world and how to live this. So it was agreed to unanimously. And it was agreed to in the presence of. Okay? So it was done completely by the tupuna. They put their mark to the paper. And it was witnessed. Now there's two forms of witnessing. One, you can witness that you know this individual putting their mark to the paper. You don't have to see what's on the paper. But you have witnessed that you know this individual and they have put their mark on the paper. Or you can witness the document. In other words, say, I too am in agreement with this, and put my mark on it. Henry Williams, missionary. George Clark, James Clement, all names that are still here today. Gilbert Mayer, merchant. We have a descendant actually of Gilbert Mayer. Here. We are all descendants. Most of us are descendants from the people who 180, nearly 200 years ago got together to put this documentation in place. That's why we are here. And that's why it pains me and pains a lot of us when we see these things not being upheld and we see the animosity that is directed through the propaganda. Te Tireni Te Waitanga of 1840. What's interesting is that the crest, the coat of arms for New Zealand, is one of the very few, about the only one I think I've come across, that actually has two people on it. Most of them have animals. See the position that the chief's standing in. He's in the right. Holds the authority. The other one is representative of this document, which is the jurisdiction, okay, an area of responsibility. So again, you've got a preamble. Queen of England, in her gracious consideration for the chiefs and peoples of Nu Tireni, and her desire to preserve to them their land and to maintain peace and order amongst them, has been pleased to appoint an officer to treat with them for the granting of the governance of their country and of the honours adjacent to the Queen. Bearing in mind, seeing that many of her subjects, Her Majesty's subjects, have already settled in the country and are constantly arriving, and that it is desirable for their protection as well as the protection of the natives to establish a government amongst them. Now what happened was that these guys came sailing into here and they captured this. They captured the ship's state. So they dress up in the uniforms of the officers of the ship. And you think they're there in their proper positions. But they're pirates. And you can see that by their deeds, because they don't stand to their oaths of office. They don't think that it involves them. So they're operating in a complete deception and a fraud. Now, because under the 1835, under this document, the Congress of Hapu hold the authority and thus hold the proclamation of sovereignty and therefore the sovereign order, and because now Elizabeth II holds the mantle of governance that was granted, the privilege that was granted to Victoria, and she sits here as sovereign by constitution, sovereign of the realm of New Zealand, constitutional sovereign. And if you write to her, you'll get a letter back from her private secretary saying the Queen is a constitutional sovereign only. And that's exactly correct. She is sovereign of the realm of New Zealand by the Constitution of 1835, which gave the privilege, granted a privilege of governance for her to set up an administrative, Victoria, to set up an administrative realm. That's all. Because as you can imagine, Hapu did not have the facilities, the infrastructure or the administrative capabilities to actually oversee and monitor those who were arriving. So they did a really, really smart thing. They got somebody else that could do the job really well to do it. And they were going to receive benefits from doing that. Royalty. Royalty is meant to go to her, to Elizabeth. The rest comes to us. But they've switched it around. They've done a good job. You've got to take your hat off to them. It's been going on for thousands of years. Anyway, our ancestors understood what was going on and they put these documents in place. So first off, they did was that they had public international recognition that we are of sovereign state, we have a constitution, we have a rule of law, and we are internationally recognised. Then we did an agreement with a great administration team, the British Empire, which was inveigled with the corruption, who carried the mantle of sovereign for a while, okay, the responsibility. So we did an agreement with them. Now they were already strongly inveigled by the regime that's still in place today, the oppressors. Pirates are just an arm of it. It's just who operates. And they captured that ship estate. Now they did the same thing in Australia under the Whitlam government. If you go online you can find a lot of information about that, about how they cut Elizabeth out of Australia. Where we are very fortunate is that we have the 1835. okay, internationally recognised proclamation, so we can actually call Elizabeth back to her position as holding the privilege of governance and to place her realm to order. New Zealand is not a country, it has no land. That's one of the deceptions. It's an administrative realm only. Okay? It's there to administer. Hence, all your acts and statutes, most of your acts and statutes, say act to bind the crown. Well, they're talking about to bind the crown of Westminster. These guys say, well, we're not the crown of Westminster. We've captured that, so we don't have to adhere to it. What we're saying is, well, who the hell are you anyway? You're here unlawfully. You have invaded us. And you are enslaving us. Your deeds show that. Okay? So we're dealing at an international level now with this. You know, good old New Zealand, we're just a little country, but we're a great country too. So this is how this deception came about. And of course these guys, and through the Law Society, which is a private association of fee-paying members, which I have not been able to find any letters patent for or any authority to even operate in this territory, let alone within the jurisdiction, that's how they took control of the ship estate, through the pirates, and how they exert and keep their control is through the Constabulary and the Judiciary. Now, the oaths of the MPs, the Constabulary, the Judiciary, are all to Queen Elizabeth II. They're not to the people of the country or the land. They're to Elizabeth II. The reason that is because she holds the privilege of governance. So they swear an oath of service to her to uphold the 1840 internationally recognised agreement of the parties. The fact they don't do that is what we bring to their attention. Hello, this is an internationally recognised agreement. You are bound by it, because if you're not bound by it, then you aren't who you say you are. Therefore, you're flying under a false flag. You're a bunch of pirates flying under the flag of the realm of New Zealand. Now they want to raise their true colours. So, we'll get on to the true colours in a little bit, which is quite interesting. So, the privilege of governance was granted, which when you think of it is really switched on, because you've got people who didn't have that administrative skills now participating in an agreement where a lot of people are going to come and settle, there's going to be a lot of trade happening, there's a royalty needs to be collected to pay for the administration of this. So any people that should be paying anything are those who are operating, who are not of this land and operating a commercial, and those who are not born of the land. Because they're using the birthright of those born of the land. So therefore they pay for that, because their birthright is in the land where they were born. So a lot of our European ancestors, they came here on the invitation. And if you have a look at immigration, you will see that after 1835, there was a lot of immigration stepped up. The first collection that we're aware of trees, fruit trees, to come to this country, came out on a vessel specifically designed for it, flying under that flag. And there's 3 of us here who are descendants of 3 of the families that came on that vessel. Okay? So it was an orchestrated, it wasn't a colonisation, you know. This wasn't the British riding over here and going, bugger all you locals and we're going to take over the place. No, these guys were. And some of them were British. You know, there's pirates in every nationality. You know. But the document in its true, and the documents in their true form were done absolutely in honour. In absolute respect. Absolute honour of the native people and what we were looking at, what our ancestors were looking at creating here. It was a place that we could live in peace and harmony. Now the 1835 is not just relevant to this territory, and one of the reasons, apart from obvious time constraints with travel, that it took over 28 years of negotiation was because it is actually set up as a template for the world of how to restore constitutional laws, how to bring in constitutional laws, how to restore and bring in rules of law for every territory on earth. It's a template. Okay? We the hereditary chiefs, or we the heads of clans of the parts of Scotland, of the land known as Scotland, you know, all sovereign power and authority resides with the heads of clans. We will gather together at Edinburgh in the 3 days of summer. because the rest of the year is winter anyway. Yeah, so it's actually a structure. It can be done with the First Nations people in America and Canada. Yeah, we are the chiefs of the First Nations. Tribes of First Nations of the area known as North America. We will gather together wherever we choose to. And there's our constitutional order. And we will gather and we will make our laws. Because that's our right. So this document was put in place as a template for the world. It's just that, as I say, when it came in, it actually sent a bit of a shockwave through the regime of oppression, because our ancestors actually got one step up on that regime. Hence, they sent these guys in. Now, Sydney was one of the biggest pirate ports in the Caribbean, in the Pacific. Second only to the Caribbean. But Sydney, there was a newspaper article coming out a little while ago, I've got a copy of it somewhere, where there was upwards of 100 pirate vessels operating out of Sydney, under the auspices of the New South Wales Company, which goes back to International Monetary Fund now, but goes right back to Londinium and the square mile of London. See, when my ancestors came over with William the Conqueror made provision for Londinium, because that's what it was known as. London is just under a square mile. All the area around it, which people call Greater London, is actually the city of Westminster. And the Westminster Crown only has authority there. It has no authority within the square mile of London. That's why the Queen asks permission and walks behind the Lord Mayor of London. Now, the provision that was made with Londinium at that time of William the Conqueror was that they would keep all their ancient rights and free liberties, customs, both by water and by land. Okay? Now, one of their customs was to actually have slaves. In 1833, there was the Slavery Abolition Act, which was an act to abolish slavery throughout the British Empire. Okay? 2 years before this document came into being. And it states in that act, the purpose of the act, which was to abolish slavery throughout the British Empire, except for possessions of the East India Company. Now, if you want to abolish slavery throughout an empire, why would you make a provision? Because they weren't part of the British Empire, but they wanted that perception to be seen as, and that's how they operate, under the guises of law, under the guise of legality, but at the end of the day, they are pirates, they are slavers. Okay? So, notice how often they use the word, protection for people, to preserve to them their land and to maintain peace and order amongst them, because the 1840 was there to uphold and reinforce the 1835. 1835 stands alone. That in itself is a standalone document. However, it gave birth to the agreement of the parties.
So Mark, what does the Crown place, or did the government place so much emphasis on the Treaty of Waitangi and the Whakapūtanga's not, they don't mention it, do they?
Because if you have a look on government websites, you will see the translation they've got of the Te Tiriti, which they call the Treaty of Waitangi, as actually a deception, particularly Article 1. And I think I've got a copy of that here where it says, and they cede for all their sovereignty for all time, forever and ever. Well, as we know, you can't do that. You can't cede sovereignty of somebody else. And you can't do it forever and ever, for generations to come.
So they've sort of found a loophole, is what you're saying, it seems to a way to...
No, they're just operating in corruption and fraud. Yeah. Under the guise of that. But it is, that's why the documents were done in the native tongue, because internationally recognised that in the native tongue shall prevail. So if you want to have an interpretation of the document, go see the native people. That's why it was done that way, just because we'd seen what had happened, our ancestors had seen what had happened elsewhere. So she proposed to the chiefs of the Congress of Nu Tireni and other chiefs to agree to the following articles. Now, Article the first. Again, these are interpretations to our understanding. The chiefs of the Congress of Chiefs and the other chiefs who have not yet joined the Congress grant to Queen of England forever the entire governance of their country. Now what they're saying is that once you joined this Congress, this structure, this constitutional order, you would be agreeing that the governance of the area was still maintained by the British Crown. That's not the authority over. That's the administration of the jurisdiction of the realm of New Zealand. This would stop others inveigling their way in. Now, the pirate translation, the chiefs of the Confederation of the United Tribes of New Zealand. Well, New Zealand's not even in the document. The word New Zealand is not in the document. It's Nu Tireni. And the separate and independent chiefs who have not become members of the Confederation cede to Her Majesty the Queen of England absolutely and without reservation all the rights and powers of sovereignty which the said Confederation or individual chiefs respectively exercise or possess, or may be supposed to exercise or to possess over their respective territories as the sole sovereigns thereof. What a load of bollocks. I mean, look at the word count for a start. You know, when you go back to this one, well, it's quite similar, the word count, even though, you know, when it comes with translation of ideas into different languages, but I mean, it's pretty bloody obvious to me. You know, have a look at that. Yeah, have a look at that. This is the big deception. This is what the pirates use. No, they ceded their sovereignty, and then they come out and say, oh, well, no, but we didn't cede sovereignty. That's a whole other story, because that actually, in a way, that actually is technically accurate, because they had not proclaimed it either. But this is where the deception, and this is how the pirate inveigled their way in it by capturing the ship of state, and then, through propaganda, implemented their way of how things should operate. So we've been under, you know, increasing pirate control or oppression of the slavers for a long time now. Well, 180 years. Okay? 175 is from the 1840. That's why, and we'll get down to that a little bit there. So we'll flick that off where it deserves to go. So we get back to the truth and the article, the second. Queen of England confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and peoples and to all the natives of Nu Tireni the ownership of their lands. Well, Maori didn't have a concept of ownership the way the Western world does. You cannot own that which you do not create. You know? So, who owns the land? The Creator does. What the people do is they are there to care for it and administer it for the coming generations. So in that respect, again, you're taking intents and concepts from one totally different culture and language and bringing them into another one. So in that respect, they are the owners. They're the owners of the right of kaitiaki, of guardianship of their ropis. They own that right. It's theirs and theirs alone. Which in 1840, all land sales that had been done before 1840 were actually null and voided. But the chiefs of the Congress and other chiefs grant to the Queen the exclusive right of purchasing such land, which is known as the right of preemption, as the proprietors thereof may be disposed to sell at such prices as shall be agreed upon between them and the persons appointed by the Queen to purchase them. Now, for them to agree to sell any land when you're under the Congress of Ngā Hapu, that is an agreement that's actually would be done throughout that Congress. Being aware that this was set up as a protection so the pirates couldn't get a foothold upon the land. However, what they were doing was that they were cutting the House of Windsor crest out of documentation and imposing it into other documentation and writing on it and making it look like that certain people had the right to purchase on behalf. But bear in mind that very quickly after 1835, particularly 1840, then went into these massive what we call the land wars. Wars are orchestrated. And wars are orchestrated to deceive people. So while you are distracted or your focus is upon this war, all sorts of nefarious things are being conducted behind your back. In return, because this was an agreement of the parties, fair consideration needs to be given here. So, Victoria was granted the right of purchase of the land. She was granted the privilege of governance. Okay? And Elizabeth actually, who now holds that, that mantle, twice that I'm aware of, has come out and publicly stated that they have never bought 1 square inch of land here. Because they couldn't. Because under the constitutional order and the international recognition, it's never agreed to be being sold. So the whole thing about fee simple title and people thinking they're living on freehold land and it's their land. Oh yeah? Wait till the pirates find gold or coal under your land and see how much you own it. And in return for granting the governance to the Queen, the natives of Nu Tireni shall be protected by the Queen of England, and the rights and privileges of British subjects will be granted to them. Now, one of the deceptions that come out is the rights and privileges as British subjects. There's a big difference between those two words, right? So when we're granted the rights and privileges of British subjects, that doesn't bring us under the authority or subject to the Crown of Westminster. It just says any of the rights, privileges that we don't already have, that a British subject has, we now have. And one of those is to be able to travel to England without a visa. Because a British subject doesn't require a visa to return home. But more importantly for us in this time, is one of the rights we have of British subjects is protection from aggression. And let's face it, we are being sorely aggressed upon right now. You know, where our whole societal infrastructure is being driven to waste and collapse. You know, where we've gone from the third highest quality, generally speaking, because not everything was all roses, you know, to not even ranking in the top 20 now, where we've got people who can't even afford to build their own dwelling, or are stopped from building their own dwelling by legislative authority. You've got to have a permit to do that. Don't tell me I need a permit to build a dwelling for my family. That's my right. It's also my responsibility. I don't need to get a permit to do that. Now, it makes common sense that you would build a dwelling that was safe and secure. That's why we have councils, because they're there to serve the people. So you go along to the council and say, oh, well, this is the latest installation we've got, this is the way we think that it should be done, do. And they'll get there to give you advice and help you along the way, not to punish you. Not to charge you every step of the way to actually live your life, live your right.
And restrictions and rules.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, it's very simple. Did I agree to this? No, go away. You know, I had a guy I met who was up in the north, standing on the roof of his house, council arrived, 2 guys from the council, down tools, stop work, down tools. I mean, the guy's on his own on the roof. You know, it's like there's a work gang of 50 there. Yeah. And he leans over the roof and goes, who are you? We're from the council. He says, I didn't ask where you're from, I asked, who are you?
Sorry, Marcus. Thank you, mate. I look forward to your next one. Hopefully I'll be here longer. I've got to head back to Auckland.
Okay, mate, thanks for taking the effort for coming up.
Awesome, mate.
Yeah. And he said, who are you? He's the compliance manager and I'm the building inspector. Didn't ask what you did. Asked, who are you? Well, I'm Bob and he's Dave. Right, Bob and Dave, do you have a vested interest in this property? No. Then go away. He said it a little more forcefully than that. But and what he did was he put a notice of trespass upon his gate. Yeah? Because here's a question, interesting question to ask a council. Could you please show your clear ownership of the land upon which you are rating? Because if you don't own it, how can you place a tax upon it? And they can't show clear ownership. They only show fraudulent titles of usage. That's all it is. So, as I say, one of the other rights that we have of British subjects is protection from aggression. However, because of the situation, of this situation here, Elizabeth, should she choose to, cannot impose her will here. Because she would be ceding her sovereignty. Because one of the codes of the sovereign is never the aggressor will be. So because under the 1835 hold the authority, we can request that she come and place her realm in order. In other words, what we're actually doing is we're invoking an agreement of the parties, an international agreement of the parties. When she receives that, what she chooses to do about that is her choice. But she's not going to know until she gets it. Okay? Because although we're under oppression, you can imagine what sort of oppression some of the members of that family have been under. And although a lot of people like to slag them and all the rest of it, each is responsible for that which they do. And a lot of people get caught up in structures and associations through indoctrination that actually they don't want to be a part of, like we have now in a lot of our public service, where we've got a lot of people in the constabulary who are leaving it. Because they don't like how it's being operated and what's being done. They actually join to serve the people, not to punish them. That's why I take my hat off and acknowledge the police and the judiciary when they behave accordingly. So we put emphasis upon the behaviour that's required, rather than spend up focusing on that which isn't. When they operate out of their oath of office, shine a light on them. Now, you may put in a judicial complaint, you may put in a complaint to the police authority, but you don't know if an officer of any of those dominions, if you like, is operating out of their oath of office unless you know their oath of office. You can put in a complaint, it may be whitewashed, but at least you have brought it to the attention, because we're in a time of accounting now. And when these people touch this stuff, time of accounting's here. What did you do about it? Oh, you pushed it off to the side. But you are bound by this. Because you can't bullshit the universe, no matter how good you think you are. This is where we're unique here. Now, because we're dealing with an entity that has no ethics and no honour, you can be as right as you like. But when they impose their will upon you using force, that's their responsibility. Our responsibility is to actually stand for what's right. Our responsibility is to the next generation coming. So the only way we're going to bring this to order is by actually standing to it. And we've got the support of the international documentation, which you can say, read the document. Are you not bound by this? Well, if they say no, then what are they even doing here? Because this is an invasion. This is an invasion of our right of self-determination. This is an invasion of our homeland. You know, this is an invasion of the land that has nurtured us from the time we were born and from the generations before that. And all I'm doing is saying no. And more people are doing the same, just saying no. It's how you can do it. And that's why we start with a proclamation. It gives you your place to stand. Have the right of self-determination. Are you rebutting? It doesn't matter about any of the other rights. You have the right of self-determination. Are you rebutting? Well, it's either a yes or a no. And if the answer is no, then there's no further business to be done then, is it? If the answer is yes, then so you are enslaving me. Well, they are between the rock and a hard place. But it just needs more and more people to actually stand up courteously, politely, honourably, and ask the question. Are you rebutting my proclamation? Are you enslaving me? Because by their deeds we can see that that's exactly what's going on.